My fiancé banned my parents from our wedding because his parents don't like them, leading to heartbreak and the end of our relationship. I, 28, female, got engaged to my boyfriend, 30, male, of 2 years a couple of months ago, and we're supposed to get married in 6 weeks from now. We've already booked the venue of our choice, and my parents have offered to pay for it as well. By the end of this week, we were supposed to send out the invitations, but almost 10 days ago, my fiancé completely blindsided me by saying that he didn't want my parents at the wedding. That just seemed ridiculous to me because I'm on good terms with my parents, and I'm also their only child, so of course they'd want to attend my wedding. Like my dad was supposed to walk me down the aisle, for God's sake. I asked him why he'd say something like that, and he confessed that his own parents didn't like mine, which is why they told him to make sure my parents didn't attend. I couldn't understand, for the life of me, why they'd want such a thing because, as far as I'm concerned, my parents had been nice to his parents, and there was no bad blood between them that I knew of. But then, my fiancé informed me that a few weeks back, when our families had met for dinner, my parents had apparently been really rude to them, and they hadn't liked it. I couldn't imagine my parents being rude to anyone, let alone my fiancé's parents, and I told him that I couldn't believe what he was saying because it seemed really unlikely. We got into a massive argument about it, and I told him that if I couldn't invite my parents, then we'd have to have a separate ceremony for them exclusively. He told me he'd think about it, but honestly, I wasn't going to let that happen. I was just bluffing and wanted to be petty. So, the very next day, I sent the bill of the venue to my fiancé's parents, because obviously, if my parents weren't invited to my wedding, then I wouldn't let them pay for anything either. Besides, the people who are so insistent on making sure my parents didn't attend should also be paying for things if they want to be involved in the decision-making for the wedding. So far, they haven't offered to contribute a single dollar to the wedding, and everything was being paid for by us. My parents had offered to foot the bill for the venue to make it easier for me. But now my fiancé's parents could pay for it since they wanted to be involved. And again, this led to another huge fight between me and my fiancé that very evening, since his parents had wasted no time in telling him about how insolent I was. He told me that I had no right to force or guilt-trip his parents into paying for anything, and I should apologize to them. But I didn't feel sorry for what I'd done. If they had the audacity to demand that my parents don't attend my wedding, then they should have had the guts to foot the bill for the venue as well. It's their son's wedding, too. My fiancé and I were having a really tough time dealing with all this and kept fighting for 3 days straight. By the end of the third day, I was so emotionally exhausted that I actually wanted to call off the wedding entirely. There really was no point in getting married when we were fighting so much, and we were barely even talking to each other. But then, he apologized to me for everything on the third night and said that we could still work things out as long as we were willing to stick together, and I appreciated that. His apology made me feel a little less resentful, and I thought that this would fix things. He was even willing to admit that his parents were being weird and couldn't justify what they were demanding, since it was a big day for both of us, and we deserved to be happy and have our parents present with us. We'd sort of reached a dead end on that conversation, and had no idea what to do next that wouldn't inevitably lead to more drama, so we decided to give it some time. We also decided to avoid fighting over this because that was clearly not helping the situation at hand. I believed that his apology was sincere and didn't feel as angry after, but I was an idiot and should have known that he wouldn't tolerate me trying to insult his parents at any cost. Last night, my fiancé informed me that he'd canceled the venue that we'd booked and had decided that we'd have the wedding in our backyard instead. And now that there was no venue to pay for, we didn't need to have my parents at the wedding at all. I was dumbstruck because of several reasons and didn't know where to start. The biggest reason was that I could hardly believe that after being so apologetic for these past few days, he'd suddenly pulled a 180 and had gone behind my back and canceled the venue that we decided upon together without even consulting with me first. And he also believed that my parents paying for the venue was the only reason I wanted them to attend my wedding. I mean, truly, that's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. Besides, the most fundamental issue with getting married in our backyard was the fact that it just wasn't big enough. And I don't think our landlady would approve of it either. I ended up snapping at him, and yeah, you guessed it, there was another massive argument. But I guess that was the last, since there was no turning back from what he did. I told him that I couldn't give less of a damn about what his parents liked, and I didn't need their permission to invite my parents, and that if he didn't make things right, then I was afraid I'd have to cancel the wedding altogether. He didn't seem too fazed by that and even said that I could go ahead and cancel everything, since after what I'd done. He didn't feel like getting married anyway, and had only waited around to get back at me for insulting his parents. The venue had taken a week to confirm the cancellation, and so he'd been waiting around just for that. These past few days had been nothing but an act, and I'd fallen for it. He'd Intended for me to get pissed off and call off the wedding, and that was his revenge. All because I'd sent the bill of the venue to his parents. I was devastated that he'd do this to me because that was 2 whole years of my life completely wasted. I packed up my stuff and left that house within an hour or so and landed at my parents' place. I was sobbing really hard because even while I was leaving, he'd made no attempt to stop me and didn't even look like he cared about what was happening. It took me a while to calm down and explain to my parents what was going on because they had no clue, since I hadn't really told them anything. Once I finally explained the situation to them, they seemed really upset. They seemed pissed off as well, and I'm sure if I hadn't been in such a state, they would have called my fiancé up and given him a piece of their mind because what he'd done was truly messed up. I don't know why he couldn't just call the wedding off and break up with me the day I sent that bill to his parents. If he was that angry, he could have just done so without dragging it all out and making a total fool out of me. During these past few weeks, every time I think about the way I was so blissfully happy and unaware of the fact that our relationship was already over, I just want to throw up because it's just really sickening. I haven't been able to bring myself to eat anything since last night. And neither did I get to sleep properly because I just keep wondering if this could have been avoided. I still do love my fiancé, even though I'm trying really hard not to. But I was with him for 2 years, so it's obviously not that easy to just let go overnight. I don't know if I should blame myself for what happened or not either, and honestly have absolutely no idea if this was actually my fault. I know I'd intended to insult his parents by sending them the bill, but I hadn't imagined that it would end up this way. So, AITA for sending my fiancé's parents the bill for the venue when they said they didn't want my parents to attend our wedding? Update 1. So, I've been living with my parents for 3 days now, and I finally learned what exactly had happened at that dinner where my fiancé's parents had found my parents really rude. So, apparently at one point my fiancé had gone out for a smoke, and I was in the kitchen struggling to open another bottle of wine, so it was taking a little more time than I would have expected. Our parents got to talking, and my fiancé's mother mentioned how nice it was that I was upholding traditional values and doing all the work in the kitchen. She even boasted about how she'd never allowed her son or husband to ever even set foot in the kitchen throughout their life. My parents ended up actually laughing at this and told her that I was just in the kitchen because I decided to cook that day, but otherwise, my fiancé and I always take turns. It was the truth, and I had mentioned to my parents that I was proud of our little arrangement because it felt right and, most importantly, equal. My parents had raised me that way, and I didn't mind my boyfriend cooking for me sometimes. But that didn't sit right with my fiancé's parents at all. I don't think my fiancé's parents knew that and were pretty taken aback. They tried to tell my parents that they must be mistaken, but my parents insisted that it was true, and if it wasn't, then they'd be really disappointed because they wouldn't want me to take up all the responsibility of household chores and cooking meals alongside a full-time job just because I was a woman. They said that they had different beliefs and would prefer a more balanced marriage when my fiancé and I were equals. When my parents said that, my fiancé's parents made a face and refused to say anything more. My parents had realized then that they'd been offended by what they'd said but hadn't thought it was a big enough deal to talk about and spoil my relationship with them before it even began, since at the end of the day, I was marrying my fiancé and not his parents. So as long as he was on board with our values, it didn't matter what his parents believed. But now, my parents knew that they'd been wrong and apologized to me for not telling me about this earlier. They'd messed up big time, but honestly, I don't blame them for anything. They were just trying to keep things peaceful, but unfortunately, it happened to backfire. And I don't think them telling me about this earlier would have made much of a difference. If anything, it probably would have been me breaking things off with my fiancé even earlier, since his parents sounded pretty sexist, and I didn't want to get married into a family like that. His parents had always been civil to me whenever we'd met earlier, but I'm sure that would have changed once we got married. So, in a way, what happened was for the best. I'm still upset about everything, but I've accepted the fact that my fiancé isn't the right person for me. I'll just have to deal with it. Update 2. Hey guys, first things first. The reason I'd had to move out and not my fiancé was because I'd moved into his house first, and we used to split the rent, but now he's on his own. So I hope that explains why I chose to leave. Anyway, it's been almost a week since I left, and today I went back to get all my things. I've been avoiding going back to his house like the plague because I didn't want to see him. He hadn't contacted me since that last fight, and I'd given up any hope of reconciliation, but I needed my things back, so I finally went back today. He didn't seem to care when I showed up with a bunch of empty boxes and didn't say a word to me the entire time that I was there. I felt awful that he'd refused to even acknowledge my presence, but then there wasn't much that I could do to make him take notice of me. I packed my things in silence and took them back to my car all by myself. I didn't ask him for help either because I Didn't want to talk to him unless he spoke first. After an hour or so, I was finally done and was really tired as well. So I just wanted to go back to my new home, my parents' place, and unwind. Only when I was about to leave did my fiancé stop to talk to me. It wasn't to apologize, unfortunately, but just to talk about how we'd split the bills for whatever we'd spent on the wedding so far. Fortunately, it wasn't a lot since there were still several weeks to go, so we decided to split the amount. He'd already calculated it, and I told him that I'd send him the check by the end of this week itself. It was a short and direct conversation. We didn't beat about the bush. He then wished me luck for the future, which was kind of surprising for me, but I wished him the same and then left. I don't know if his parents knew about the wedding being called off or not, but I'm guessing that they'd be pretty pleased now that I know the conversation that had taken place between them and my parents. I'm sure that they wouldn't like me splitting the chores with my fiancé after we got married, and that's definitely a non-negotiable for me. I'm not going to be the kind of wife who has a job and also does all the work at home, and that's what my fiancé's parents wanted. Or maybe they wouldn't even be okay with me working after we got married. And if my fiancé is still siding with his parents despite their beliefs, then who's to say that he won't change after we get married? We didn't speak about these things, but these were the things going through my mind when I was driving back home. Maybe this was the closure that I needed. Update 3. Okay, so it's been close to 3 weeks since we broke up, and of course, I have to start letting my friends know that we're done. I know I should have done so earlier, but I just didn't have the energy to deal with that. I was still trying to cope with the breakup itself and hadn't spoken to anyone apart from my parents and my coworkers just because I had to talk to them for work. I'd even been working from home as well to avoid having to interact with anyone at all. I don't know if what I did was right or not, but I did what I had to. Anyway, last night I finally got back to all the texts from our friends that had been piling up. My ex-fiancé and I had been to the same college but hadn't been friends back then and only got to know each other a few years ago through social media. We did share a couple of mutual friends, though, and one of them happened to be my closest friend. I told all my friends the short version of the story, that there were irreconcilable differences due to which we had to part ways. I used the most formal terms I knew because I didn't want to seem vulnerable, but this friend of mine is the only person I trusted enough, and so I ended up telling her about the whole situation. She knew everything about the conversation that our parents had had and how my fiancé had canceled the booking of the venue just to get back at me. And she was shocked that he was capable of things like these because he had the reputation of being quite the gentleman, and these didn't seem like gentlemanly qualities at all. It felt good to let it all out to a friend because while my parents would support me no matter what, now I knew that I was certainly not in the wrong because then my friend would have told me the problem. Now the problem is that my ex is accusing me of trying to ruin his reputation among his friends because my friend told her boyfriend, and now neither of them is speaking to him because of what he'd done. I don't understand how this is my fault because I just shared my side of the story with a friend. I didn't intend on making him look bad, but he said and done things that inevitably portrayed him in a bad light. So I don't really think that this is my fault. He believes that I shouldn't have said anything at all, but that's just stupid and impractical because we can't just put something like this off indefinitely. So we're in a bit of a tiff right now, and he's been texting me incessantly to post something that he's written, like celebrities going through divorce do. I'm not willing to post that because A, it makes it seem as if he had no fault at all, and I don't agree with it, and B, I don't think I need to announce my breakup on social media. Our wedding was canceled before the invitations were sent out, so I don't see the reason to make such a big deal about it. It was going to be super intimate anyway, with only a few friends and relatives. I've already conveyed the news of my breakup to them, so I don't understand why I have to release a statement on social media too. I know he wants to do this so that he doesn't look like the bad guy anymore, since our friend circle will eventually find out the truth now that one couple knows anyway. But I don't feel I owe him anything now. If he hadn't been so cruel to me, then I wouldn't have a horrible story to tell anyway, and nothing would ruin his image, so this is all his own fault, and he needs to own up to it instead of trying to force me to cover up for him. Update 4. Hey there, it's been 1.5 months since the last update, and I'm thankful that I'm doing a lot better now than I was back then. My ex and I got into a huge fight when I refused to share the breakup post that he'd written just so that he could avoid taking accountability for his actions among our friends. He visited my parents' house to discuss with me and told me that I needed to do some damage control and make sure our friends didn't get the wrong impression because of what I said, but whatever I said was true. So I didn't understand what exactly the big deal was. I didn't have to do any damage control. He did. If he was so concerned about his reputation, then I don't know. Maybe he should have just been a better freaking person instead of being sly and manipulative when I told him that I didn't owe him a thing anymore. And I wasn't doing anything that he asked of me. He got super mad. and I was really happy that we were broken up by then because of the way he acted out after that, and the things he said to me really proved that I'd made the right call. He got furious and started yelling at me about how I was trying to ruin his reputation by talking crap about him to his friends, and was trying to take revenge just because he dumped me. I argued back, and it just kept getting worse. So evidently he just punched the wall, which was so typical. It didn't scare me in the least, but I told him that this was destruction of property, and he had to pay for it. I also called the cops and reported him, and his parents had to bail him out. Things got pretty heated up after that, since once his parents realized that I'd involved the cops, they started doing everything in their power to make me look like the bad guy. That very night, his parents sent me an email saying that they would make sure I landed up in prison for the way I was trying to harass their son. His mom even started a GoFundMe so they could file a defamation lawsuit against me for talking crap about my ex, even though I'd only spoken the truth. No more, no less. They could afford the cost of it, but they were too stingy, and most importantly, they didn't intend on filing the lawsuit at all. They just wanted the attention and wanted people to talk about how I was the worst, so their own son would look like a saint, that's all. I was lucky that our friends came together in my support and shut that down pretty quickly. I'd blocked my ex and his parents on all platforms, so I didn't know what they were getting up to behind my back. I had to rely on our friends to keep me up to date, and apparently there was a lot of effort from their end to make me look like someone who was trying to ruin my ex's relationship with his parents somehow. I didn't understand what exactly they hoped to achieve because honestly, if they stayed quiet about this whole thing instead of lashing out like this, then my ex would have probably lost fewer friends. He and his parents continued to post stuff against me, but I didn't care to respond until he made a post about how my parents had raised me to be a lazy narcissist with absolutely no values. That was the last straw for me, since he had literally no right to insult my parents again and again. I was not going to tolerate this level of disrespect under any circumstances and couldn't ignore them any longer, so I unblocked him and called him up. I told him that he could either take all those posts down, or I'd make sure to take legal action against him, and unlike his parents, I wasn't bluffing. He tried to fight back and seemed unfazed, but I could tell from his voice that he was scared, so he did eventually end up taking that post down along with all others. I guess after this last run with the law, he didn't want any more trouble, so good for him. That was 2 weeks back, and we haven't talked since then, so I'm hoping to finally move on with my life now.